My name is Allison Walker, and at 34 years old, I discovered that $15 million can buy many things, but not family love. Growing up in my sister Madison's shadow, I never imagined my secret success would trigger a nuclear explosion at Sunday dinner. One business decision changed everything, transforming me from forgotten daughter to family ATM overnight. The look on Madison's face when that magazine article revealed my net worth still haunts me. Family dynamics I accepted for decades shattered in minutes, proving that money doesn't just talk, it screams uncomfortable truths. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever felt like the overlooked sibling. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up in Lexington, a middle-class suburb just outside Boston, our family appeared perfectly normal from the outside. My father Robert worked in insurance sales, bringing home a stable income that kept us comfortable but never extravagant. My mother Karen taught third grade at the local elementary school, the same one Madison and I attended. We lived in a modest four-bedroom colonial with a well-kept lawn and a basketball hoop that never saw much use. It was the quintessential American suburban existence, complete with family dinners and summer vacations to Cape Cod. But inside those beige walls lived a family dynamic that was anything but balanced. From my earliest memories, Madison, 2 years my senior, was the undisputed star of the Walker household. She had a magnetism about her, bright blonde hair like my mother's, an easy laugh, and the kind of natural charm that drew people in. I was different, more reserved, analytical, with my father's brown hair and a tendency to observe before speaking. The favoritism wasn't subtle. When Madison turned 16, my parents surprised her with a used but sporty red Volkswagen Beetle, complete with a giant bow on top. Friends were invited over, cake was served, and photographs documented every moment of her excitement. 2 years later, when my 16th birthday arrived, I received driving lessons and permission to use the family's old Honda when Madison wasn't using it, of course. Madison needs reliable transportation for all her activities, my mother explained when I questioned the disparity. You mostly just go to the library anyway. This pattern repeated endlessly throughout our childhood. Madison's bedroom was redecorated 3 times during high school to match her evolving personality. My room kept the same pale blue walls and basic furniture from elementary school through college. When Madison made the junior varsity cheerleading squad, my parents attended every football game, my father videotaping her performances while my mother cheered enthusiastically from the stands. When I won the state mathematics competition, neither could attend due to a scheduling conflict. Madison had a hair appointment my mother couldn't miss. Even our Christmas presents revealed the imbalance. One year, I unwrapped a practical sweater and school supplies while Madison received a state-of-the-art stereo system. "Your sister is so into music," my father said, noticing my expression. "We got you things you need." I needed to feel valued too, but that was never acknowledged. Madison's C+ report cards were celebrated with dinner out because she tried her best, while my straight A's were met with a perfunctory, "good job," and immediate questions about why I wasn't more involved in social activities. Academic success was my thing, but it was never enough. Madison was mediocre at many things: cheerleading, student council, choir, and received boundless praise for each endeavor. I excelled in mathematics, science, and business club competitions, yet these achievements were treated as expected rather than exceptional. The dynamic affected us differently. Madison grew accustomed to validation without effort. She developed an expectation that doors would open for her, that mistakes would be forgiven, that her desires mattered. I developed resilience and self-reliance, learning early that external validation wouldn't be forthcoming. I began setting my own standards, determining my own worth, finding satisfaction in achievements that went unnoticed by my parents. Only my grandmother Helen seemed to see me clearly. My mother's mother lived an hour away, and her monthly visits became my lifeline. Unlike my parents, she asked specific questions about my interests, remembered details from our previous conversations, and celebrated my academic accomplishments with genuine enthusiasm. "You have a gift for numbers, Allison," she told me during my freshman year of high school. after I'd explained an economics project that had earned me top marks. And a mind for business. Those are rare qualities that will take you far in life. Grandmother Helen had worked as a bookkeeper for 40 years, unusual for a woman of her generation. She understood the value of financial independence and planted that seed in me early. For my 14th birthday, she gave me a leather-bound journal with the words, "Business plans," embossed on the cover. "Write down your ideas," she encouraged. "Even the ones that seem impossible now." That summer, I started my first business venture, a dog walking service for our neighborhood. I printed flyers at the library, calculated fare rates based on dog size and walking duration, and created a scheduling system to maximize efficiency. By the end of August, I had 8 regular clients and had earned nearly $600. When I proudly showed my parents the money I'd saved, my father glanced up briefly from the newspaper. "That's nice, honey. Just make sure you're putting some aside for college." Madison's planning to try out for the school musical, my mother interjected, effectively ending any discussion of my entrepreneurial success. Isn't that exciting? I stopped sharing my achievements with them after that, finding it easier to pursue my interests quietly rather than hope for recognition that never came. The pattern was established: Madison would shine, I would fade into the background, and our parents would maintain the imbalance with unwavering consistency. I didn't realize then how deeply these childhood dynamics would shape our adult relationships, or how dramatically they would explode 16 years later when my sister discovered just how far my quiet ambition had taken me. The college application process highlighted our family's imbalanced dynamic with painful clarity. Madison applied to expensive private universities with mediocre grades and a resume of extracurricular activities that demonstrated breadth without depth. I applied strategically to schools with strong business programs, including several prestigious options where my academic record made me a competitive candidate. When acceptance letters arrived, my parents didn't hesitate to commit financially to Madison's education at Colgate University, a beautiful private institution costing nearly $50,000 per year. My acceptance to MIT with a partial scholarship was met with a different response. "We simply can't afford to support both of you at expensive schools," my father explained, spreadsheets laid out on the dining room table. "Madison's already committed to Colgate, and we've worked out the finances for that. You've always been independent, Allison. We know you'll figure this out." "You received scholarships," my mother added, as if that justified the disparity. "Madison needs more support." I ended up at UMass Amherst, a perfectly respectable state university with an excellent business program. The partial scholarship covered about 40% of my expenses. For the rest, I took out loans and worked 3 part-time jobs, morning shifts at a campus cafe, weekend hours at the university bookstore, and night shifts managing the computer lab. I slept an average of 5 hours nightly, maintained a 4.0 GPA, and never asked my parents for a dime. Meanwhile, Madison called home weekly requesting additional funds for sorority events, spring break trips, and wardrobe updates. My parents dipped into their retirement savings to ensure she had the full college experience. Despite my punishing schedule, I thrived academically. I double-majored in business administration and computer science, recognizing early that the intersection of these fields held tremendous potential. While most business students avoided the more technical courses, I embraced them, often being one of 3 women in classes of 30 students. During my sophomore year, I connected with Professor Jenkins, a former tech entrepreneur who had sold his cybersecurity company and turned to teaching. He noticed my unique combination of business acumen and technical skill, taking me under his wing. "Most business students understand markets, but fear code," he told me. "Most computer science students love code, but don't understand business fundamentals. You speak both languages fluently. That's rare and valuable." Under his mentorship, I began developing my understanding of security software markets, identifying gaps in existing products, and conceptualizing solutions. For my senior thesis, I created a prototype of a network security application that identified unusual patterns in user behavior, a precursor to the software that would eventually make me wealthy. When graduation arrived, My parents attended the ceremony, but left immediately afterward to help Madison move into her first apartment in New York City, where she'd secured an entry-level position at a public relations firm through my father's college roommate. They didn't stay for my department's honors recognition, where I received the Outstanding Graduate Award. Madison needs help setting up her new place, my mother explained. You understand. I did understand, more clearly than ever before. The pattern wasn't going to change, and expecting it to would only lead to continued disappointment. After graduation, I accepted a position at a Boston-based tech startup called Network Defend. The salary was modest, but the experience would be invaluable. I rented a tiny studio apartment in Somerville, living frugally and using every spare dollar to pay down my student loans and build a small investment portfolio. Madison, meanwhile, bounced between jobs in New York, rarely lasting more than 6 months at any position. The work environment wasn't nurturing, or my boss didn't appreciate my creative approach, she would explain during family holiday gatherings. My parents would nod sympathetically, never questioning her narrative. Not everyone finds their path right away, my father would say, patting Madison's hand. You're still discovering your talents. When I mentioned a successful security protocol I'd implemented at work, saving the company thousands, my mother would smile vaguely before turning the conversation back to Madison's latest job prospect or relationship drama. Allison's always been such a workaholic, she'd say, as if my professional dedication were a character flaw rather than a strength. Madison understands the importance of work-life balance. Work-life balance apparently meant calling our parents weekly asking for financial loans to cover rent when she'd spent her paycheck on weekend trips to the Hamptons with friends. None of these loans were ever repaid, nor were they expected to be. Despite my family's disinterest, I was thriving professionally. By day, I developed security solutions for network defense clients. By night, I refined my own ideas, coding until the early morning hours in my tiny apartment, fueled by instant ramen and determination. The security application I'd conceptualized in college was evolving into something with genuine market potential. 3 years into my career, I had paid off my student loans, saved $30,000 through extreme frugality, and built a working prototype of my security software. Professor Jenkins, who had remained a mentor, reviewed my business plan and prototype, offering critical feedback and encouragement. This has potential, Allison, he said after examining my code. Real potential. Have you considered seeking investment? I had, but was hesitant. The tech startup world was overwhelmingly male, and I'd already experienced my share of condescension and dismissal. At industry events, men would frequently assume I was in marketing rather than development, speaking over me or explaining basic concepts I'd mastered years earlier. Still, I began quietly researching angel investors and venture capital firms, preparing pitch materials and refining my prototype. I was methodical, running financial projections with multiple scenarios, identifying potential clients, and strengthening my patent application. During this period, my grandmother Helen passed away at age 84. I was devastated. She had been my most consistent supporter, the one person in my family who truly saw me. At the funeral, Madison delivered an emotional eulogy that brought tears to everyone's eyes, despite the fact that she had visited our grandmother perhaps twice annually in recent years. I, who had called Helen weekly and visited monthly, sat silently in the front row, my grief too private to perform. A week after the funeral, I was surprised to receive a call from my grandmother's attorney. Helen had left me $75,000, her life savings from decades of careful budgeting. The accompanying letter read simply, "For your business ventures. I've always believed in you. Love, Grandma." Madison received grandmother's jewelry collection, which my mother assured everyone was of equal value to my inheritance, though it was worth perhaps 1/10 of the cash amount. For once, I didn't mind the discrepancy. The money wasn't just capital, it was belief, the one thing my family had never given me. With my grandmother's investment, I made the decision that would ultimately change everything. At 25 years old, I quit my steady job at Network Defend and went all in on my own venture, which I named Secure Pattern Solutions. You're leaving a perfectly good job to do what exactly? My father asked when I mentioned my career change during a rare phone call. I'm starting my own cybersecurity company, I explained. Is that really wise? My mother chimed in from the extension. Startups are so risky. Madison's friend Jason tried something similar and was bankrupt within a year. I've done my research, I replied calmly. And I have a solid business plan. Well, don't come asking us for money when it fails, my father said with finality. We're already helping Madison with her rent until she finds something that suits her creative talents. I hadn't asked my parents for financial help since college, but pointing this out seemed futile. I won't, I promised, and I meant it. Whatever happened next, I would succeed or fail on my own terms. The first year of Secure Pattern Solutions nearly broke me physically, mentally, and financially. I moved to an even smaller apartment in a less desirable neighborhood to minimize expenses. My diet consisted primarily of instant noodles, eggs, and whatever produce was on clearance. I worked 18-hour days, coding until my vision blurred, then collapsing onto my futon for a few hours of sleep before starting again. The security software I developed used behavioral analytics to identify potential network intrusions before traditional systems could detect them. Rather than looking for known threat signatures, my program established baselines of normal user behavior and flagged anomalies, an approach that was relatively novel at the time. Initial rejections were crushing. I approached 5 major tech companies with my prototype, and all 5 declined, offering vague feedback about market readiness and integration challenges. The real issues, I suspected, had more to do with my age, gender, and lack of industry connections than with my product. During a particularly low moment, after a dismissive meeting with a potential investor who had spent more time looking at my body than my presentation slides, I called Madison. We weren't close, but I craved some family connection during this struggle. After listening to me for approximately 2 minutes, she interrupted. That sounds hard, ally, but I'm actually dealing with something major right now. My roommate used my expensive face cream without asking, and now we're not speaking. Plus, I have a date with this incredibly hot finance guy tonight and nothing to wear. Can I call you next week? I never called her with my problems again. The turning point came 8 months in, when my former Professor Jenkins connected me with Blake Thompson, an angel investor who specialized in cybersecurity startups. Unlike previous investors, Blake actually understood the technical aspects of my product. He tested the prototype rigorously, attempted to break through its defenses, and asked incisive questions about scalability and implementation. This is impressive work, Allison, he said finally. You're addressing a problem most companies don't even realize they have yet. That's both your biggest challenge and your biggest opportunity. Blake invested $250,000 for a 15% stake in Secure Pattern Solutions, a fair valuation that allowed me to maintain control while giving the company runway to grow. More importantly, he introduced me to his extensive network of technology professionals and potential clients. Our first major contract came from Meridian Financial, a mid-sized financial services firm that had recently experienced a data breach. Their security team was receptive to innovative solutions, and after a successful 3-month trial, they implemented my software across their entire network. The results exceeded even my optimistic projections, with the system identifying and preventing 3 potential breaches in the first 6 months. Meridian became our case study, opening doors to other financial institutions concerned about similar vulnerabilities. By the end of our second year, Secure Pattern had contracts with 12 financial services companies and was expanding into healthcare security solutions. I hired my first employees, a developer named Ryan who shared my vision, and Jasmine, a brilliant marketing strategist who could translate complex technical features into compelling benefits for non-technical executives. Word spread through the industry about the small, innovative company producing remarkable results. Technology blogs began mentioning Secure Pattern in articles about emerging security trends. Our client list grew steadily, and with it, our revenue. I maintained a lean operation, reinvesting profits into research and development rather than flashy offices or extravagant salaries. 3 years after founding the company, we achieved our first $1 million quarter. I celebrated by upgrading from ramen to takeout Thai food and allowing myself a full weekend off, the first in over 3 years. My personal salary remained modest, but my ownership stake in Secure Pattern had become valuable. I told no one in my family about this success. During our 4th year, everything accelerated. A major data breach at a Fortune 500 company created industry-wide panic about behavioral security threats, exactly the problem my software was designed to address. Suddenly, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Our client list tripled in 6 months. We moved from my apartment to actual office space and expanded to a team of 15. Then came the call that would transform everything. TechShield, one of the largest cybersecurity companies in the world, wanted to discuss acquisition possibilities. Their initial offer was $40 million. The negotiations were intense. TechShield wanted complete ownership and intellectual property rights. I insisted on maintaining licensing rights and operational independence. We eventually reached a compromise. TechShield would acquire Secure Pattern for $36 million, but I would retain certain intellectual property rights and continue to head the division as a semi-autonomous unit within their corporate structure. At 29 years old, after taxes and investor payouts, I became worth approximately $15 million. I bought a modest but comfortable 2-bedroom condo in Cambridge, invested the bulk of my windfall conservatively, and continued working with the same dedication as before. My lifestyle changed in small ways. I bought quality groceries without checking prices, replaced my ancient laptop, and occasionally splurged on business-class flights for international client meetings. But to casual observers, I remained the same hardworking, unassuming Allison. At family gatherings, which I attended out of obligation rather than enjoyment, nothing changed. My parents still fawned over Madison's latest endeavors, a short-lived jewelry design business, followed by an attempt at interior decorating, then a certification in personal training. Each new passion was heralded as the thing that will finally showcase her incredible talents. "How's your computer job?" my mother would ask me vaguely, never remembering the name of my company or what we actually did. "It's going well," I'd reply, the understatement of the century. "That's nice, dear. Did Madison tell you about her new fitness clients? She's training the wife of a real estate developer now. Very exclusive." I could have mentioned that I just closed a security contract with one of the largest banks in Europe. I could have shared that my software had prevented a potentially catastrophic data breach at a major hospital system. I could have revealed that industry publications were calling me a pioneer in behavioral security analytics. Instead, I just nodded and asked Madison appropriate questions about her latest venture. At some point, the secrecy became its own strange comfort. In a world where I was increasingly recognized and respected, family gatherings were the one place where I remained invisible Allison, the overlooked daughter who would never quite measure up to her sister's effortless charm. There was something almost freeing about it, like stepping into a time capsule where nothing had to change. If my family noticed that I never asked for money, never complained about financial struggles, and always arrived in a new model car, they never mentioned it. In their narrative, Madison was still the star, and I was still the supporting character. For the time being, I allowed them to maintain that fiction. But as my wealth and success grew, so did the likelihood that their carefully constructed family dynamic would eventually collapse under the weight of reality. By my early 30s, the disparities in our parallel adult lives had become almost comical. I was leading a team of 40 engineers at TechShield's behavioral security division, regularly speaking at international cybersecurity conferences and sitting on the advisory boards of 2 tech startups. Madison, at 36, was on her 7th career attempt, this time as a social media consultant for local businesses and still receiving monthly loans from our parents. What remained constant was our family's perception of our respective places in the hierarchy. During the rare times I visited my parents' home, the walls remained adorned with Madison's cheerleading trophies and framed photographs from her college graduation, sorority events, and various vacations. Evidence of my existence was limited to a single family portrait from my high school graduation and a small framed newspaper clipping about secure pattern that my mother had relegated to the guest bathroom. "I put it where guests would see it," she explained when I noticed its placement. "Don't you think it looks nice with the blue towels?" Madison's financial dependence on our parents deepened as she approached 40. When her car needed extensive repairs, they immediately offered to co-sign for a new vehicle, a luxury SUV that stretched their budget. When I had needed my first car, I'd received advice on good used models under $5,000 and suggestions for picking up extra tutoring jobs to pay for it. "Your sister needs something reliable and safe," my father explained when I questioned the extravagance during a rare moment alone with him. "Her business requires her to meet clients all over the city." My business required me to meet clients all over the world, but I'd purchased my own vehicle since college without assistance or acknowledgement. The holidays became increasingly difficult. One Christmas, I watched in disbelief as Madison unwrapped a set of high-end kitchen appliances to support her brief interest in gourmet cooking, while I received scented bath products from the mall, the same gift I'd been given for the past 3 years. "We know you don't have time for hobbies with your work schedule," my mother said, noticing my expression. "We thought you could use some relaxation." The irony was painful. I could have purchased the entire mall if I'd wanted to, yet here I was, pretending to be excited about mass-produced lavender bath bombs. Madison's resentment toward me grew despite, or perhaps because of, her favored status. As her 30s progressed without the success she'd always assumed would come naturally, her attitude toward my steady career advancement soured. She began making subtle digs about my work ethic, suggesting I was missing out on real life by focusing on my career. "Some of us care about more than just money and status," she commented during a family dinner after I mentioned needing to leave early for an early flight to London for a client meeting. "There's more to life than working yourself to death, Allison." This from a woman whose rent was still subsidized by our parents at age 36. I struggled with whether to help my family financially. I could have easily paid off my parents' mortgage or funded Madison's constant stream of business ventures. But something held me back, a nagging feeling that financial assistance, without addressing the underlying dysfunction, would only enable more of the same behavior. Instead, I conducted an experiment. Using an anonymous bank account, I made a $50,000 payment toward my parents' mortgage, with a note indicating only that it was from a grateful client of Robert Walker's insurance services. I wanted to see how they would respond to this windfall and whether they might consider that I could have been the source. The results were telling. My father immediately assumed it was from a wealthy client whose insurance claim he had handled years ago. My mother speculated that the bank had made an error in their favor. Neither even mentioned me as a possibility, despite knowing I worked in a lucrative field. "We're putting the money aside for Madison's wedding fund," my mother told me excitedly over the phone. "She and Derek are getting more serious, and you know she's always dreamed of a beautiful ceremony." Derek was Madison's latest boyfriend, a charming but chronically unemployed entrepreneur with vague business plans and expensive tastes. They had been dating for 4 months. The wedding materialized a year later, an extravagant affair at a historic mansion that cost well over $100,000. My parents drained their retirement accounts and took out a second mortgage to fund Madison's perfect day. When they asked if I could contribute, I wrote a check for $5,000, a token amount I knew wouldn't strain their expectations of what a computer person might have available. Privately, I arranged to pay the caterer, florist, and photographer directly, covering nearly half the wedding costs without anyone knowing. I watched my parents beam with pride as they accepted compliments on the lavish celebration they had provided for their daughter, never suspecting that their overlooked younger child had made it possible. The emotional distance between us continued to grow, though I maintained the expected appearances at family gatherings. I met Nathan during this period, a thoughtful, successful architect who saw me clearly in a way my family never had. Our relationship developed naturally, without the drama that characterized Madison's romantic history. When I finally brought Nathan to meet my parents, the experience was eye-opening for him. Within 30 minutes, he had witnessed my mother interrupt me 3 times to redirect conversation to Madison's honeymoon photos. My father asked if I was still doing that computer security thing, despite my having sent him articles about my company regularly for years, and Madison make pointed comments about my boring wardrobe and lack of decorating skills. Is it always like this? Nathan whispered as we helped clear dinner dishes. Actually, they're on relatively good behavior today, I replied. They haven't yet suggested that my career is the reason I'm still single at 33. As if on cue, my mother entered the kitchen. Madison was just saying you two should double date with her and Derek. Wouldn't that be nice? She has such good insight into relationships, Allison. Maybe she could help you with some updates. She glanced meaningfully at my conservative blouse and practical hairstyle. Nathan's eyes widened slightly, but he maintained his composure. Later that night, as we drove back to my condo, he took my hand. You know that's not normal, right? He said gently. The way they treat you? I shrugged. It's been this way my whole life. That doesn't make it okay, he insisted. You're extraordinary, Allison. The fact that they can't see that says everything about them and nothing about you. His words resonated, shaking loose something I had buried deep. For the first time, I allowed myself to acknowledge the full extent of the pain my family's dynamics had caused me. The recognition was both liberating and terrifying. If I wasn't the person my family had always defined me as, the lesser daughter, the workaholic, the one who needed less, then who was I? And what would happen if they finally saw me as I truly was? I wouldn't have to wait long for answers. The careful separation I had maintained between my professional success and my family life was about to collapse spectacularly, triggered by the most mundane of circumstances, a dentist's waiting room magazine, and my sister's idle curiosity. The day everything changed began ordinarily enough. It was a Tuesday in April, and I was in San Francisco for meetings with TechShield's West Coast clients. Madison was in a dentist's waiting room in Boston, flipping through magazines to pass time before her appointment. According to what she told me later, she almost missed it, a feature in Business Technology Monthly about women leaders in cybersecurity. There, on page 37, was a professional photograph of me in a boardroom, arms crossed confidently, next to the headline, Security Visionary. How Allison Walker revolutionized behavioral analytics and built a $50 million division at TechShield. The article detailed my career trajectory, from founding Secure Pattern Solutions to its acquisition by TechShield. It mentioned the patents I held, the industry awards I'd received, and most damagingly, included an estimate of my personal net worth. Industry insiders place Walker's net worth at approximately $15 million following the acquisition and subsequent growth of her security division. Madison's dental cleaning was immediately forgotten. She canceled her appointment, rushed to her car, and called me 6 times in succession as I sat in a client meeting 3,000 miles away. When I didn't answer, she called our parents. Did you know? She demanded when my mother answered. Did you know Allison is worth $15 million? My mother, predictably, assumed Madison was exaggerating or confused. That can't possibly be right, sweetheart. Allison works in computers. She does fine, I'm sure, but nothing like that. I'm looking at her picture right now. Madison insisted, her voice rising. It's in Business Whatever magazine. They call her a security visionary. It says she sold her company for millions and never told any of us. My phone began buzzing with texts as I emerged from my meeting. Mom, Allison, call immediately. Important family matter. Dad, your sister just called with some story about you in a magazine. Need to talk. Madison, I can't believe you hid this from us. Family meeting tonight. Be there. By the time I checked my messages, the family emergency meeting had already been scheduled at my parents' house for 7 p.m. Eastern Time, regardless of the fact that I was in California for business. I called my mother to explain my location, only to be cut off mid-sentence. This is not something to discuss over the phone, she said firmly. We expect you to make arrangements to be here tonight. This is a family crisis. Mom, I'm literally on the other side of the country for work. I have meetings scheduled all day tomorrow. I can't just. If you can afford private jets with your secret millions, you can certainly find a way to be here, she interrupted, her tone uncharacteristically harsh. Your sister is extremely upset. I realized arguing was pointless. I'll see what I can do, I said finally, hanging up before she could respond. After apologizing profusely to my clients and rescheduling the next day's meetings, I booked a last-minute flight back to Boston, paying an exorbitant fare for a first-class seat on the only available direct flight. The irony wasn't lost on me. My first truly extravagant use of my wealth was to rush across the country to be ambushed by my family about that very wealth. I landed at Logan Airport at 6:30 p.m. and took a rideshare directly to my parents' house in Lexington, arriving precisely at 7 p.m. to find 3 cars already in the driveway: my parents' sensible sedan, Madison's luxury SUV, co-signed by our parents, and Derek's sports car, purchased with a loan from Madison, which ultimately meant it was funded by my parents. The atmosphere inside was thick with tension. My mother sat rigidly on the living room sofa, hands clasped in her lap. My father paced by the fireplace, pausing occasionally to adjust the family photos on the mantel, all featuring Madison prominently. Derek lounged in an armchair, scrolling through his phone with performative disinterest that couldn't quite mask his attention to the unfolding drama. Madison stood when I entered, her face flushed with emotion, a crumpled magazine clutched in her hand. Well, well, she said, her voice trembling. If it isn't the secret millionaire. Madison, I began, setting down my overnight bag. Don't, she snapped, thrusting the magazine toward me. Just don't. How could you keep this from us? From your family? All these years, pretending to be just getting by, accepting our concern, letting mom and dad worry about you working too hard, and all along you've been, what? Laughing at us? Thinking how stupid we all are. I never thought you were stupid, I said quietly, taking the magazine and glancing at the article that had exposed my carefully maintained separate worlds. I just kept my professional life private. Private, my father interjected, his voice unnaturally controlled. There's private, and then there's deceptive, Allison. According to this, you sold a company 4 years ago. For years. And not once did you think to mention this to your own parents. I mentioned my company many times, I countered, maintaining my composure through years of practice. I sent articles about Secure Pattern. I talked about our contracts and growth. No one ever seemed particularly interested. Not interested in $1 million company? Madison scoffed. That's convenient. It wasn't relevant to our family relationship, I said, choosing my words carefully. My financial situation doesn't change who I am to you. Doesn't change. My mother finally spoke, her voice quavering. Allison, you've been living a completely different life than what you've presented to us. All those holidays where we gave you simple gifts because we thought you couldn't afford more, all those times we worried about you working too many hours to make ends meet. I never said I was struggling, I pointed out. You all just assumed. Because that's what normal people do. Madison exploded. Normal people share major life events with their families. Normal people don't hide becoming millionaires from their own parents and sister. Derek looked up from his phone, suddenly interested. 15 million, actually, he corrected, earning a sharp look from Madison. My father had moved to the dining room table, where he sat heavily in a chair. I don't understand the secrecy, Allison. Are there tax issues we should know about? Is that why you've kept this hidden? Of course his first concern would be potential legal problems, not pride in my accomplishments. My taxes are immaculate, I assured him. There's nothing illegal or improper about my success. Then why? My mother pressed. Why would you hide this from the people who love you? The question hung in the air, loaded with decades of complicated history. I could have deflected, could have manufactured some benign explanation about privacy concerns or professional discretion. Instead, something inside me finally broke open. Because it didn't matter, I said simply. Because nothing I've ever accomplished has mattered in this family compared to whatever Madison happens to be doing. That's not true, my mother protested automatically. It is true, I continued, my voice steady. It's always been true. When I started my company, Dad's response was to warn me not to ask for money when it failed. When I sent articles about our security innovations, no one read them. When I mentioned client meetings or industry recognition, the subject was immediately changed to Madison's latest project. So this is some kind of revenge? Madison demanded. Making us look like fools for not knowing you're rich? No, I said, meeting her gaze directly. This is me living my life without expecting validation I learned long ago wouldn't come. This is me succeeding on my own terms because I had to. While watching us struggle financially, my father interjected. Knowing we took out a second mortgage for Madison's wedding? Knowing we've been helping her with rent and expenses? This was treacherous territory. I hesitated, then decided complete honesty was my only option now. I haven't been just watching. I made an anonymous payment of $50,000 toward your mortgage 2 years ago. I paid for half of Madison's wedding without telling anyone. I've been helping, but quietly. The room fell silent as this information sank in. Madison was the first to recover, her expression shifting from shock to indignation. So you've been playing God? Deciding when and how to bestow your generosity without anyone knowing? Do you have any idea how condescending that is? I thought it would be easier that way, I admitted. I didn't want to change our family dynamic. Well, congratulations, Madison said bitterly. It's changed now. So, what's your plan with all this money, Allison? Just keep hoarding it while watching your family struggle. I haven't been hoarding anything, I replied, feeling defensive despite my resolution to remain calm. I've invested in my company, in my employees, in my future. And what about your family's future? My mother asked. Family supports each other, Allison. That's what we've always taught you girls. I couldn't help but laugh, a short, disbelieving sound that escaped before I could stop it. Have you? Have you really taught that consistently? My mother's face flushed. What is that supposed to mean? The years of carefully maintained composure were crumbling now. It means that support in this family has always flowed primarily in one direction, toward Madison. It means that I've been taking care of myself since I was 16 because that was what was expected of me, while Madison still gets her bills paid at 36 because she needs more support. That's not fair, my father objected. Your sister has had different challenges. Like what? I asked bluntly. What exactly has been challenging about Madison's life compared to mine? No one had an immediate answer, which was an answer in itself. Derek cleared his throat awkwardly. Maybe this is a good time to bring up our business proposal, he suggested to Madison. Since everything's out in the open now. Madison brightened immediately. Actually, yes. Allison, Derek, and I have been developing an amazing business concept, a luxury wellness retreat combining his hospitality background and my social media expertise. We've been struggling to secure investors, but now that we know about your situation. She let the implication hang in the air, her expression expectant. You want me to invest in your business? I clarified, astonished by the rapid pivot. We're family, Madison said, as if that explained everything. This is what family does for each other. We support each other's dreams. Mom and Dad have always supported mine, and now you can too. I looked around the room at my family, at my parents nodding in agreement with Madison's assessment, at Derek already pulling up pitch deck slides on his phone, at Madison's expression of entitled expectation, and something crystallized within me. No, I said simply. Madison blinked in confusion. What do you mean no? You haven't even heard the details yet. I don't need to, I replied. I've built my success through careful decisions and hard work. I don't make investments based on family obligation. After everything this family has done for you, my mother gasped, genuinely shocked by my refusal. And with that, the last thread of pretense snapped. Everything this family has done for me? I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. Let's talk about that, shall we? I set my bag down and took a seat at the dining room table, suddenly calm in the eye of the emotional storm I'd avoided my entire life. Madison remained standing, arms crossed defensively, while my parents exchanged nervous glances. Let's talk about my 16th birthday, when Madison got a car and I got permission to borrow the family Honda when she wasn't using it. Let's talk about how you attended every single one of her cheerleading performances, but couldn't make it to the state mathematics competition where I took first place. That was one time, my mother protested weakly. It wasn't one time, I continued steadily. It was a pattern. It was Madison's C+ grades being celebrated while my straight A's were expected. It was her bedroom being redecorated 3 times in high school, while mine kept the same furniture from elementary school. It was her getting designer clothes while I got practical basics. I turned to my father. It was you paying for her entire private university education while telling me to take out loans and work through college because you've always been independent, Allison. My father's face reddened. We did the best we could with what we had. The best for Madison, I corrected. I worked 3 jobs in college. I slept 5 hours a night to maintain my scholarship while still paying my share. Madison called weekly asking for spending money for sorority events and spring break trips. College is about more than just academics, my mother argued. Madison needed the full experience to develop socially. And I didn't? I asked. Or was it just assumed that I didn't need what she needed? That somehow I required less parental support, less celebration, less recognition. Madison snorted dismissively. So that's what this is about? You're still bitter that I was popular in high school and you were a nerd? Grow up, Allison. This isn't about popularity, I said evenly. This is about years of unequal treatment that taught me I couldn't count on my family the way Madison could. It's why I never told you about my success, because I learned early that my achievements would never be valued the way hers were. I turned back to my parents. When I started my company, I was terrified. I was 25 years old, leaving a stable job to pursue something that statistically had a high chance of failure. Do you know what would have meant the world to me then? Not money, just your belief. Just hearing, "We're proud of you for taking this risk," or "We believe in you." "We've always been proud of you," my mother insisted. Have you? I challenged. Because when I told you I was starting Secure Pattern, Dad's exact words were, "Don't come asking us for money when it fails. Not if it fails, when." And you were already helping Madison with her rent for an apartment she couldn't afford because she kept quitting jobs that weren't fulfilling enough. That's different, my father muttered. Yes, I agreed. It is different. I didn't expect financial support, I just wanted emotional support. I wanted my achievements to matter as much as Madison's attempts. I wanted the security software I created, that now protects millions of people's data, to be as interesting to you as Madison's 2-month stint making jewelry or her social media consulting business that has exactly 3 clients. Madison's face flushed with anger. So you're just jealous. You've been successful specifically to prove something, and now you want us all to bow down and worship you because you have money? Well, congratulations on your millions, Allison. Has it made you happy? Because you seem pretty miserable to me. I'm not miserable, I said truthfully. I love my work. I'm proud of what I've built. I have genuine friends and a relationship with someone who values me for exactly who I am. What makes me sad is that my family never has. That's not fair, my mother repeated, tears welling in her eyes. We love both our daughters equally. Love isn't just a feeling, Mom. It's shown through actions. And your actions have consistently shown Madison that she matters more. That her needs come first. That her dreams deserve support while mine were optional. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table to my father. These are statements showing the mortgage payment I made 2 years ago and the wedding expenses I covered. I didn't do it for recognition, I did it because I care about this family despite everything. I wanted to help without changing the dynamic that seemed so important to everyone. My father opened the folder, his expression shifting as he reviewed the documents. Why wouldn't you just tell us? He asked, his voice softer now. Why the secrecy? Because nothing would have changed, I said simply. If you'd known I had money, you would have expected me to fund Madison's lifestyle the way you have, without addressing why she still needs that support at 36. You wouldn't have suddenly valued my accomplishments or recognized the work it took to achieve them. The only difference would be that I'd become the family bank instead of the overlooked daughter. Madison had been uncharacteristically quiet, but now she exploded. This is such bull. You've always played the victim, Allison. Poor you with your perfect grades and your boring responsibility and your secret millions. She grabbed a decorative vase from the side table and hurled it against the wall, where it shattered spectacularly. Madison, my mother gasped. No, Madison shouted, tears streaming down her face now. She doesn't get to come in here and act superior after lying to us for years. She doesn't get to sit in judgment of my life when she's been what? Watching us like some kind of experiment? Deciding when we deserve her precious help. That's not, I began, but Madison was beyond reason. You think you're so much better than me because you built some stupid security whatever? Because some magazine called you a visionary. She was pacing now, gesturing wildly. You know what your problem is, Allison? You've always been jealous that people actually like me. That I have a personality beyond spreadsheets and computers. So you made a bunch of money, so what? It was probably just luck anyway. Derek stepped forward, placing a hand on Madison's arm. Babe, maybe we should. She shook him off violently. No, I'm done pretending that St. Allison is just misunderstood. You've always thought you were better than this family, haven't you? With your fancy degrees and your patents or whatever. Well, if we're such a disappointment to you, why are you even here? Why not just take your millions and disappear? Madison, please, my mother pleaded. Let's all calm down and… Are you taking her side? Madison rounded on our mother, her voice rising to a shriek. After everything? After I'm the one who visits every week, who calls you every day, who actually acts like a daughter while she's off playing billionaire. I'm not taking sides, my mother insisted, though her body language, angled toward Madison, hands outstretched placatingly, told a different story. I just think we need to understand why Allison felt she couldn't share her success with us. Because she's a secretive, judgmental bit. Enough, my father interrupted, his voice firm. Madison, control yourself. This isn't helping anything. Madison's face contorted with rage and hurt. Of course. The one time you tell me to control myself is when precious Allison finally gets caught in her lies. Well, guess what? I'm done. I'm done with this family meeting, I'm done with her condescension, and I'm done pretending we're one big happy family when clearly Miss Millionaire has been looking down on us all along. She grabbed her purse and Derek's arm. Let's go. Now. But what about the business proposal? Derek whispered, glancing at me uncertainly. Forget it, Madison hissed. We'll find investors who aren't emotional manipulators. Family is supposed to support each other unconditionally, Allison. But I guess you missed that lesson while you were counting your money. She stormed toward the door, pausing for one final barb. Don't expect to be invited to Thanksgiving this year. Or any year. As far as I'm concerned, you're not part of this family anymore. The door slammed behind her with such force that the remaining family photos on the wall trembled. Derek followed a moment later with an awkward nod in my direction, clearly torn between loyalty to Madison and curiosity about my wealth. In the sudden silence, I remained seated at the table, strangely calm. My mother began quietly picking up the shards of the broken vase, her hands trembling. My father stared at the financial statements, his expression unreadable. I should go, I said finally, standing and gathering my bag. Allison, wait, my mother began. She didn't mean. She did, I interrupted gently. And that's okay. This has been a long time coming. We never meant to make you feel less important, my father said, looking up from the papers. We just thought Madison needed more help. You were always so capable, so self-sufficient. I became self-sufficient because I had to be, I replied. I'm not angry anymore, not really. I'm just tired of pretending this dynamic is normal or healthy. For any of us. I walked to the door, pausing with my hand on the knob. I love you both. That hasn't changed. But I need some time to figure out what kind of relationship we can have moving forward, one based on who we actually are, not who we've pretended to be. Neither of my parents tried to stop me as I left. The night air was cool against my face as I walked to my waiting rideshare, tears finally breaking free after years of careful control. But beneath the grief was something unexpected, a profound sense of liberation. The truth, with all its messy implications, was finally out in the open. As the car pulled away from my childhood home, I called Nathan. How bad was it? He asked immediately. Through tears that were rapidly giving way to unexpected laughter, I described Madison's meltdown, my parents' confusion, and the shattered vase. Are you okay? Nathan asked when I finished. Strangely, yes, I replied, watching my parents' house recede in the distance. For the first time in my life, I think I actually am. The 6 months following the family confrontation were both challenging and healing. I returned to my condo that night and slept more peacefully than I had in years, as if a weight I'd grown accustomed to carrying had suddenly been lifted. The next morning, I made an appointment with a therapist specializing in family dynamics and childhood emotional neglect, something I should have done years earlier. Dr. Levine helped me understand that my experiences had a name: differential treatment. She explained that while my parents likely didn't intend to cause harm, the consistent pattern of favoring Madison had shaped my self-perception and relationships in profound ways. My drive for achievement, my reluctance to share vulnerabilities, my careful independence, all were adaptations to a family system that had taught me my needs were secondary. "You developed incredible resilience," she told me during one session. But resilience forged through neglect often comes with wounds that need healing. I threw myself into that healing process with the same dedication I'd applied to building my company. I read books on family dynamics, journaled about childhood memories, and gradually allowed myself to feel the sadness and anger I'd suppressed for decades. I learned that acknowledging these feelings didn't mean I was bitter or vindictive. It meant I was finally treating my emotional needs as valid. Meanwhile, my family processed the revelation in their own ways. Madison maintained radio silence for the first 2 months, then began a campaign of passive-aggressive social media posts about toxic family members and money-changing people. My mother called weekly, her voicemails oscillating between tearful apologies and subtle guilt trips about Madison's continuing distress. My father's response surprised me most. 3 weeks after the confrontation, he emailed requesting a meeting, just the two of us. We met at a quiet cafe near my office. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began awkwardly, turning his coffee cup in slow circles. "About the different expectations we had for you and Madison." I nodded, giving him space to continue. "I always thought we were doing what each of you needed," he said. "Madison seemed to need more, everything. More attention, more support, more validation. You were so self-sufficient, so capable. I told myself we were respecting your independence, but maybe..." He paused, looking genuinely reflective. "Maybe we were just taking the path of least resistance." It was the closest thing to an insightful acknowledgement I'd ever received from my father. "I think that's part of it," I agreed. It became a self-fulfilling pattern. Madison needed more, so she got more, which reinforced her need for external support. I needed support too, but learned not to ask for it, which made it easier to overlook my needs. He nodded slowly. "Your grandmother Helen always said we weren't seeing you clearly." I thought she was just playing favorites, but she saw something in you that we missed. "She saw me," I said simply. That was enough. We didn't resolve everything in that conversation, but it was a beginning. My father asked thoughtful questions about my company and seemed genuinely interested in understanding my work. Before we parted, he handed me a small package. "I found this in the attic," he explained. "I thought you might want it." Inside was a framed certificate from the state mathematics competition I'd won in high school, the one my parents had missed to attend Madison's hair appointment. He'd kept it all these years, though he'd never displayed it. "Thank you," I said, unexpectedly moved by the gesture. In the months that followed, I established clearer boundaries with my family. I declined the usual Easter gathering, suggesting instead that my parents visit me in Cambridge the following weekend for a dinner I would host. My mother initially protested. Madison had already planned the traditional family celebration, but eventually agreed to the separate visit. Having them in my space changed the dynamic subtly but significantly. In my well-appointed condo, surrounded by evidence of my success and stability, they related to me differently. My mother commented on my art collection and kitchen appliances with genuine admiration rather than criticism. My father asked interested questions about my investment strategy. Neither mentioned Madison until dessert, when my mother cautiously broached the subject. "Your sister is still very hurt," she began. "I understand," I replied calmly. "But her feelings about my success are hers to manage, not mine to fix." "Family should support each other," she insisted, though with less conviction than before. "I agree," I said. "Which is why I've established a trust for your retirement." It will provide supplemental income once you turn 70, with provisions for healthcare needs. My father began to protest, but I held up a hand. This isn't negotiable. You're my parents, and I want to ensure your security. However, I continued, my voice firming, the trust comes with conditions. It's for your needs only, not for subsidizing Madison's lifestyle or business ventures. Those boundaries are necessary for all of us. They exchanged glances, absorbing the implications. My mother looked ready to argue but seemed to think better of it. That's very generous, she said finally. Thank you. It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a first step toward a more honest relationship. Madison's eventual olive branch came in the form of a text message. Derek and I broke up. He only wanted me for potential access to your money. I guess I should have seen that coming. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was an acknowledgement of reality, which felt like progress. I invited her for coffee, and to my surprise, she accepted. Our reunion was awkward, but less volatile than I'd feared. Madison had found a stable administrative position at a local community college, her first job in years that didn't involve entrepreneurial aspirations or creative self-reinvention. It's not exciting, she admitted, but the benefits are good, and I don't have the Sunday night panic I had with all those other jobs. How are you managing financially? I asked directly, abandoning the pretense that had characterized our previous interactions. She flushed slightly. I had to downsize my apartment and sell the SUV for something more practical. Mom and Dad are still helping a little, but... She hesitated. I'm trying to figure things out on my own for once. It's harder than I expected. It is hard, I agreed, but also rewarding. We didn't become best friends overnight, but something shifted between us. With the uneven family dynamic finally acknowledged, we could begin relating to each other as adults rather than competing for parental resources and attention. As my personal relationships evolved, I found new purpose professionally as well. I established a mentorship program for young women in technology, focusing particularly on students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Using my grandmother Helen's name, I created a scholarship fund for girls studying computer science and business, remembering how her small acts of encouragement had sustained me when family support was lacking. Nathan proposed at Christmas, not with an extravagant gesture, but with a quiet conversation about the life we wanted to build together. We agreed on a small ceremony focused on quality time with our closest friends rather than performative traditions or family obligations. When I told my parents about our engagement, my mother immediately began suggesting elaborate wedding venues and extensive guest lists. Madison's wedding was at the Westfield estate, she reminded me. It was absolutely gorgeous. Nathan and I want something different, I said firmly. Something that reflects who we are. To my surprise, she nodded after only a brief pause. Of course. It's your day. A small acknowledgement, but a meaningful one. As I approach my 35th birthday, I found peace with my family history without denying its impact. The therapy I initially sought for family issues revealed deeper patterns that had affected my other relationships as well. My reluctance to show vulnerability, my tendency to overachieve to prove my worth, my habit of giving generously while expecting nothing in return. Working through these patterns hasn't been easy, but it's been essential. I've learned that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the freedom to choose my path and surround myself with people who value me authentically. My financial success didn't create the family dynamics that caused so much pain. It merely exposed what had always been there, creating an opportunity for growth and change. Madison and I now meet monthly for dinner, a relationship built on mutual respect rather than the assigned roles of our childhood. My parents are learning, albeit slowly, to see me clearly rather than through the distorted lens of family mythology. Nathan and I are planning a life together based on genuine partnership rather than obligation or expectation. The journey hasn't been linear, and there have been setbacks along the way. Old patterns emerge in moments of stress, requiring conscious effort to choose different responses. But with each honest conversation, each maintained boundary, each authentic connection, the path forward becomes clearer. The most valuable lesson I've learned is that self-worth cannot be determined by others' validation. It must be cultivated internally through self-acceptance and integrity. Financial success didn't make me valuable. I was always valuable, whether my family recognized it or not. The $15 million didn't change who I was, it simply gave me the confidence to stop accepting treatment that had never been acceptable. If you've stayed with me through this story, perhaps you've recognized elements of your own family dynamics or personal journey. Remember that acknowledging painful patterns isn't about assigning blame, it's about creating the awareness necessary for change. Whether you're the overlooked sibling, the favored child, or the parent trying to balance complex family needs, there's always an opportunity to build more authentic connections based on who you truly are rather than who you're expected to be. Have you experienced family favoritism, either as the favored or overlooked child? How did it shape your adult relationships? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth was never determined by your family's ability to see it clearly. You've always been enough, exactly as you are.